Welcome back to r/Neighbors from Hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. This one is titled "Neighbor Towed My Brother's Car from Our Property While He Was Deployed." Going to just start this by saying that if someone tries to mess with me, fine. But if they do something to mess with my military brother, I will fight tooth and nail. Before I just start going crazy though, I'm going to explain a few things that will help make the rest of the story make sense. With economic times being as horrible as they are, neither me nor my brother could afford a house by ourselves. So instead we decided to both go in and buy one together for the time. It makes a lot of sense financially, and while he is deployed I can have the place to myself and he cannot worry about where he's going to keep his things and come back to. So that is about it for the living situation, and now I want to take a minute to talk about the neighbor that lives a few houses down. She is an old friend of my grandma who raised me and my brother and has basically known me my entire life. I did not have a ton of contact with her, but I did see her when she came over and got babysat by her a couple of times. It was from her that my grandmother actually found out there was a decently priced house for sale, so you would think I was lucky to have someone I knew on the block. Well, nope, because she was one of those people that saw people in their late 20s still as kids and liked to report things back to my grandma. Things like if I went out and did not come home until 2 in the morning, she would tell my grandma the next day as if I was skipping a curfew or something. Even though, once again, I am a grown woman with a home, a car, a job, all of that adult stuff, her favorite thing though would be to spy on the people that I was having over and tell my grandma. It did not matter if it was my friends, a boy, a cable guy or anyone else, she seemed to constantly be checking out my driveway and in front of my house to see just what kind of people were coming over. Personally, I thought the worst was when she called my grandma and told her that she was sure I was inviting random boys over when really it was just my friends getting together to watch some TV. Or when she told my grandma how often I order food instead of cooking because if she cannot cook, she won't find a husband. You get the idea though. So now we get into the meat of the story. When my brother got deployed, he obviously had to leave his car behind and it has just been in the driveway since he left. I don't drive it since I have my own car and I know that it is his baby and would not like it. Neighbor did not recognize it though, and after a few weeks of it sitting there and doing nothing, she felt like it was her responsibility to do something about it. All she had to really do was ask me or my grandma about the strange car that never moves, to learn that it belonged to my brother. He got deployed pretty soon after we got the house and I think neighbor thought I owned it and that my brother was just living somewhere else, I guess. I don't even know if she knew he was in the army, since I tried to make it my business to avoid her. Instead of doing any of those sensible things though, she ended up getting his car towed one day while I was out at work. I got home and thought somebody had stolen it, despite it being highly unlikely in this area. It was a nice car and he loved it, so I wanted to try and figure out how to get it back before he came home. I was never in a situation like this and I didn't know what to do. I needed help. I could not call him because the last thing I wanted to do on the few chances I got to speak to him was to explain that his car was missing. He had more important things to worry about over there, so I called my grandma instead. She told me to call the police and report the car stolen and give them all the information about it that I knew. So I called the non-emergency line, where I get into another little bit of a problem. See, since the car is not mine, they did not really want to talk to me and instead said the report had to come from the owner of the vehicle. Finally, after talking to 3 people and explaining he cannot report it because he is deployed, I got to make the report in his place. and they told me they would see what they could do. The officer on the other line was honest and told me that in many cases missing cars have the plates and colors changed and just don't get found. I was devastated and ready to collapse when my phone rang, with my grandmother calling me back. She tells me how she called neighbor to see if she saw anything, and it turns out she was the one that called and got the car towed. That was when she said the stuff about it being strange and never moving, and certainly not a car she knew. I was furious for a couple of reasons, the most obvious one being her doing that without talking to us. The second, of course, being that the towing company actually took something off of my property without talking to me or even leaving me a message. I got their info and they were my next call. Even though I had a police report, they wanted to charge me $600 for the towing, and I was adamant that I was not going to be the one to pay that. It was an illegal tow that shouldn't have even happened, and if anyone should have to pay for it, it should have been Neighbor. I left them with the police report that it was a stolen car, and they agreed to keep it safe for a couple of days until I got things sorted out. I got in contact with the police again, who had to get in contact with both Neighbor and the towing company to come to some sort of conclusion. There were a few things that could have happened, and we needed to decide the best course. The first one was that since it was reported stolen and we know Neighbor had it towed, she could get in trouble for theft. And I would get the car back. The second option though is what we went with, that I would drop charges if she paid to get my brother's car back. I know, I can feel you writing the comments of disappointment that I did not have her charged, but at the end of the day though, I got the car back and she is just an old lady after all and friends with my grandma. I did not want to create too much of a problem or rift between the families, and I could tell that she was embarrassed and felt bad. The car is back, and when my brother returns he is going to have one good story to listen to. And Ripe Stars, if you still enjoy the stories about crazy neighbors, then I would really appreciate it if you could also post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Your support is very much appreciated, thank you so much in advance. And the second part of the story is from r/AskReddit. Today we will answer the question, people of Reddit, what made you quit your job on the first day? Without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one goes like this. Not technically the first day, but the second day. When I was 20 or so, I got hired to be a temporary floor member for Forever 21 during the holiday season. My training started a week before Black Friday, so the store was already kind of in chaos. On my first day of training, I walked in and the floor manager gave all the new hires a tour, showing us the facility and layout of the store. After this, I was assigned to a veteran floor member to shadow and get an idea of what my job was and what my duties would be. As soon as I was assigned, the manager dipped, never to be seen again. An hour and a half into my shift, my shadowee got an emergency family call and had to take off for a week. When this happened, I found some other floor manager and explained the situation and asked them who else I should shadow. The manager's response was, "Just do what you can by yourself, you'll be fine, everyone else is busy." That's how much I figured. We are okay, I will try. I don't know if any of you have shopped in the women's section of Forever 21, but during seasonal sales they will have multiple articles of clothing that all look almost exactly the same, but with slight differences. For example, a white cardigan with 4 buttons that looked literally the same as a white cardigan with 5 buttons. The best part was, these different items were often placed in completely separate parts of the store, and it was the job of the dressing room to return the unpurchased items to the correct section so the employees could put them back on the shelves. Well, the problem is, these employees sucked and I didn't know if they were a part of my section or not, so I would spend a ridiculous amount of time trying to find where they go before realizing, wait, this is not even my section, I've checked literally every rack. So I would put it back on the sorting rack and move to the next item. More than 50% of the stuff I was told to reshelf was not my section, I just did as best as I could and got ready for my next miserable day. The next day I come in and the store manager pulls me to her office and tells me how slow I was the day before, and if I want to keep working here, I need to be very fast. I explained my lack of training and unfamiliarity with the store, and she told me if I didn't know where the clothes were in sections, I should come in my free time and memorize where the stuff was at. I spent the rest of my shift putting clothes in random places and then never came back for a third shift. Screw that place and their management. And ripe stars, I'm not sure if that's the correct expression, but usually we say sometimes it is good to be thrown into cold water. However, when it comes to a job like this, especially in the holiday season, that's definitely not a good idea if you ask me. Have you ever worked a similar job in your life? Let us know in the comments and tell us how it was. Anyway, the next one starts like this. I used to work at a craft store as a cashier, but I quit when I moved. I ended up going back a couple years later to make some extra cash, but this time in the framing department. During the interview, they swore up and down I would only ever be a backup cashier because I said I refused to have full cashier shifts. The first shift after the interview is listed as framing, but I am put on cash and told that actually most of my shifts would be cash since they had found someone else for framing. I spent the next 6 hours giving everyone who came to my register 20% off of everything and then never went back. And yeah guys, in my book that was a first successful shift and at least someone profited. The next one, my first internship was at a Brazilian teen detention center. It is akin to a prison, but Brazilian law has some distinctions between crimes committed while as an adult or as a teenager. Teens go through socio-educational measures. I was walking through a courtyard with my supervisor when some doctors came running, flailing their arms and screaming, while officers came running from the opposite direction. I get pulled by my supervisor who just tells me to run back to our office. These teens as young as 12 had escaped their block. A few minutes later an officer comes knocking on the door of the offices and yelling for everyone to run outside because a fire had broken out. Some of the teens had set mattresses on fire in their cells. I didn't really nope out, my teacher did, she hadn't even been there that day. So I was forced by the university to choose another place to intern at. Oh well. And the next one starts like this. It was not exactly the first day, but I didn't show up after the second shift. It was a rather popular cafe chain in my country. I was hired to work in the kitchen as a cook, along with another senior cook. Let's put aside the fact that I had zero cooking knowledge whatsoever. The senior cook was leaving the kitchen every 5 minutes to smoke. So there I am, alone in the kitchen, orders are printing fast and I am standing there, not sure what to do first, and the waitress comes over yelling at me to cook stuff I don't have any business cooking. Definitely not on my own. Later on, the senior cook told me that they had at least 2 rats running around the kitchen. He showed me that they had pooped on a plate. I never came back and I am glad the place got shut down. And the next one, I was a cashier at Lowe's during college for less than a full day. I made it through the multiple day training, but there was so much stupid stuff going on, I almost thought I was on a hidden camera show. All of the employees complained about how hard they had to work while simultaneously not getting enough hours. Nobody understood why they were hiring like 4 new people. I was one of those 4. It turns out it's because they were progressing through a sexual harassment complaint that required restructuring of the store and firing off some employees. This was known to HR and explained to new hirees against company policy, but was not known to the employees, apparently some of whom still worked there, including the person doing the training. She was really inappropriate and said not to worry about the sexual harassment stuff, that everything would go back to normal soon enough and we wouldn't have to be so uptight. They fired her the day before I started, along with one of the cashiers who trained me. She also offered me terrible guidance for the application process. They were looking for part-time help and 2 of the 3 days they needed help on, I had off from school. I told them I could work nights most nights, but if they needed daytime help, it had to be on those days. She said if I was too restrictive, they wouldn't keep me on, lied to my boss about my availability to make me even more attractive than I already was, wink wink, and told me to schmooze them a bit and I would make it further. She said in the end it would not impact anything and I would get those days. My first week's schedule I was working mornings every day that I was in school and I wasn't given any hours on my days off. Aside from the fact that I was given 2 times the hours the position called for when other employees were shorted, my work schedule was literally impossible to consolidate with my school schedule. I only went to work on my first day to tell them I was quitting and that their application process was a mess. They couldn't figure out how so much went wrong, and then they asked who trained me, and everything made sense. They thanked me for at least showing up to quit, unlike the other 3 they hired who just stopped returning their calls and no-showed their first 3 days. And guys, if you have ever quit a job on your first few days, then please let us know in the comments what happened, and furthermore, while you're at it, I would really appreciate it if you could post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance, your help is very much appreciated. And the next one starts like this. My first ever job, I was 13 and I would be delivering phone books from the back of a van through people's letterboxes. So I would be in the back of the van with the phone books, and there was an older guy driving slowly while I went back and forth to the van/houses with the books. At one point the van was getting quite empty, so there was more space to move around, and we had finished the delivery in the street we were paid to deliver to, and he drove to another. While driving there, he drove, let's say, aggressively, and I fell inside the back where the books were. I was not sitting in a seat as the van had no seats in the back. As I put my hand out to steady myself, I accidentally laid it across a portable radio that had its antenna extended, but the antenna was also broken halfway and razor sharp. It sliced the palm of my hand clean open 3 to 4 inches. I can only describe what I saw as gruesome. I said to him to pull the van over and I needed help. He saw my hand and just threw me a plastic bag, the kind you would get at a supermarket, and told me to wrap my hand in it. Then he continued with the deliveries. At least he delivered the remaining books himself. I should have been taken to a hospital or at least home to my parents, and I quit after that and never showed up again. As you can imagine, my parents were quite angry at him. And guys, if you have ever worked as a kid, whether it was delivering newspapers or anything like that, what was your worst job as a kid? Let us know in the comments. And the next one, a long time ago, not long after getting my papers as a chef, I had an interview at a hotel for a position in the kitchen. The executive chef and I chatted in his office for about 20 minutes. At the time I remember him coming off as very arrogant, which is quite common in this field. I didn't think much of it at the time, as the pay was decent and the shift was what I wanted. As I was leaving his office, I turned to leave through the dining room the way I had come in, which was closed at the time. It was another hour or so before service started, and he says to me, "No, not that way. Go through the kitchen. You're not good enough to go through the dining room." I was so surprised by what he said, I just did what he asked without a word. Later on, after I had gotten home, I phoned him up and said that after having a close look, I decided that his menu was not good enough and that I would not be accepting his offer. And the next one, I got hired at a very small knockoff dollar store in an old failing mall. The owner was foreign with a very thick accent. He told me I would get $6 an hour, but neglected to mention it was under the table. I spent about an hour stocking the very overly cluttered shelves before I was told to get more chips out of the back storage area. I walk back there and there is about a dozen men sitting on boxes all crammed into a small back room. I asked where the chips were and these guys all glared at me. They started speaking in another language and rapidly motioned towards me. Then one guy got up and asked what I needed. I told him I was supposed to get a box of chips and he got a box out of the pile and handed it to me. The entire time these guys are all staring at me. Everything back there looked shady as hell and it was very uncomfortable. By the way guys, am I the only one who thinks of sort of a mafia situation here? Anyway, a while later I had to use the restroom, which was also in the back. These guys all just wordlessly glared at me while I went into the woman's restroom. While I was in the restroom, someone tried to open the door. I was the only woman there though. The owner told me he wanted me to come back that night late in the evening, well after the mall closed. I didn't show up. I came in the next morning and lied about why I couldn't work there. He still gave me the few bucks from what little time I did work. I don't know what in the hell that guy had going on there, and I didn't want to find out. Forgot to add in the best part, I was 18 and this was supposed to have been my first job. That definitely sounds like a terrible first job. Anyway, the next one, I answered an ad for a babysitting job. I was already working on a casual basis, but it was sporadic, so I thought some after-hours babysitting would be welcome extra cash. The couple were both in the military and proceeded to tell me that I would be staying in the spare room and looking after their 6-month-old child around the clock as well as doing the housework. I would have 1 day off every 2 weeks. They said it is cash in hand, so I could sign onto the dole, unemployment benefit, to make up the rest of the money. I left on the spot. They wanted a live-in housemate and nanny, not a babysitter, and they were not able to pay for one. Why they thought it was up to me to illegally collect the dole to subsidize them, I don't know. And the next one, I applied for a job at my longtime favorite restaurant, celebrated my birthday there every year. The owner asks me to come in for basically a tryout, as I communicated I was looking at other job possibilities. I come in and they just stick me on dishwashing for an hour, no biggie. Then their dishwasher doesn't show up, so the kitchen manager asks me to stay one for their lunch rush, saying I will get paid for the hours. So I do, and the kitchen staff was nice, so I was happy to help out even though I figured I would be taking a different job. I fill out a time card at the end of the shift and tell the manager I probably would not be back. He understands and thanks me for the help. Fast forward a couple weeks and he tells me to email the owner after I ask him if I should pick up my measly check. I do, and she basically tells me to F off over text, tells me it was staging and that she told me I wouldn't be paid. I respond that I understand that, but that I stayed an extra 3 hours, which I was told I would be paid for. She stops responding. I decide I want to be petty over the 40 bucks, so I get the state labor department involved. The dude goes in there and makes her pay me for the hours, including the first staging hour. Couple weeks later, I got my 40 bucks. Never went back to that restaurant. And damn guys, I gotta say, that state labor department seems very efficient. That is very surprising if you ask me. Anyway, then there was another edit from the OP saying, firstly, petty is not how I see it 2 years later. I am very glad I did this, and sharing the story with others in my city, I learned this practice was very common with local restaurants. Hopefully others learn to stand up for their labor too from my small experience. Secondly, this restaurant closed down a couple weeks after I got that paycheck. The owner made a long-winded complaint on the Facebook page about how the food culture had changed in the city and her restaurant did not fit in anymore. And yeah, this is total BS. They were always popular. Most people theorized the terrible mismanagement and employee abuse had caught up to her. And the next one, I was a waitress, the only waitress at a just opened diner. The boss didn't have me sign any paperwork, everything was under the table, but that wasn't what made me quit at the end of the night. In order to get me where he wanted me to go, he would pinch my skirt at my upper thigh, not quite the butt, but very close, and pull me around like it was a leash. Needed me in the kitchen? Rather than call me, he would come out, pinch my skirt and pull to the kitchen. Needed me at the cash machine? Again, come over to wherever I was, didn't matter if I was serving a customer, and would grab my skirt to pull me. That act in itself made some customers uncomfortable. And by the way guys, I'm wondering which customer would not be uncomfortable after seeing this unfold. Anyway, mind you, one couple left an almost 50% tip in the end, but I think it was more out of pity and embarrassment on my behalf. I was supposed to come in the next day, but I called that night and said the job was not for me. I came in a couple days later to turn in my apron and he just took a wad of cash out of his pocket and paid me then and there. Damn, he was creepy. I think it was a smart move to quit. And the next one, I was a salesman for Kirby Vacuums, which by the way is an amazing name for vacuum cleaners. First sale call was to a single elderly woman who was supporting her son in a hospital. They got us in the door by offering a free carpet clean as a demonstration. The supervisor training me pushed and pushed to make the sale until this old woman was in tears. Just as she was about to sign the paperwork, I asked if she actually wanted to vacuum, and she said it was lovely, but she couldn't afford it. I took the paperwork away from her and said not to worry. Outside I told the supervisor that I quit, to which he replied I would have been fired anyway. No love lost. I hung around for half an hour playing on my phone to make sure the supervisor left because he was a real piece of work. And the next one, it was a petrol station and the manager wanted me to work for free until I had learned their computer systems to what he deemed a satisfactory extent. I agreed to do it because I needed a job and he brought me in at 7 AM on my first day. However, he was not present to go through the training with me, so I was just standing around kind of helping out on the forecourt, but not really knowing what I should be doing. Not learning anything. After about an hour and a half without the manager showing up or anyone training me on anything, I decided that I was not going to continue to be taken advantage of and told the cashier to pass on the message to the manager that I had quit. And the last one, I worked at McDonald's years ago in their assistant manager training program, had gotten hired right out of the army. First day I met with the store manager where I would be working and training and noted that she spent the majority of the time doing entry-level work and then working OT to do store manager work. She told me this was pretty common because of the type of people they would hire. Her office was a counter and she told me she had bought a chair but corporate made her remove it. She was really nice, worked her ass off and was intelligent and told me she had been at McDonald's for 10 years. I imagined working my ass off only to be told I couldn't have a chair and decided that night I was not going to work for a company like that. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support and I hope to see you again tomorrow.